Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to... Oh, look! Content! Otherwise known as a Warframe guide. You heard me right. We have new content. That means over the next week or so, we're going to be making some big pushes to bring you, well, content on the content. With all the new shiny things that have been released, today we're going to be starting and having a look at the new Jackal encounter and all the shiny things that have come with it. Now, I want it to be known that I want this video to not only be a guide for this bad boy, but to also have a general look at DE's boss design philosophy and see how it's changed. Because let's face it, the Jackal is one of the first boss fights you're ever going to encounter when first jumping into this world of Warframe that we play. And it's fascinating to see the difference from the old encounter of how this fight is by comparison to the new version. And we're going to be taking just where this new design philosophy is going to be taking us in the future with later boss fights and later reworks we'll be looking at. But first, the actual encounter itself. The Jackal, found on Venus and Fossa. As mentioned, the first boss assassination target you are ever going to encounter. Once you get to this beautifully redesigned boss room, you will instantly notice that he no longer is just stood in the middle like a deranged statue. No, instead, you will have to use all your Tenno might to stride over gallantly to the middle of the room, and using all 2 or 3 hours of your combined Warframe experience, press the button. Now the fight begins. The Jackal slams down on a poor little helpless training mower, making that mower wonder what it did in a past life to deserve such treatment and discontent. Poor little guy. I mean, he's actually called Popcorn, if you didn't know. The Warframe community came together and was like, hey, poor little mower, he's not here anymore, he's dead. And they called him Popcorn. In fact, you can actually go and meet Popcorn on the Iron Wake on Earth. Just a little tidbit. Now, at its core, the fight revolves around the same mechanics and ideology as the previous incarnation of the Jackal fight did, basing itself around the fact that the boss is essentially invulnerable. But now there is actually some given subtext and purpose behind this invulnerability, and that subtext is nanobots. Yep, basically your job here to be able to prevent the boss from repairing itself and getting rid of that invulnerability is to jam your Parazon so far into the brain so that the Jackal will then see images of Justin Bieber singing Hey Baby Baby. The nanobots will then get so scared of Justin Bieber singing Hey Baby Baby that they will not repair it anymore, giving you the opportunity to deal damage to it. Now, before we look at the actual execution of how this works, we're going to take a look at the individual abilities, because there are some new ones, there are some old ones, and some of the old ones have been removed entirely. And let's face it, this is actually a bit of a boss fight now. Starting with the first ability, which is a bit more obvious, which is the turret, which is a high fire rate turret on the front of the boss's face, which will deal considerable damage if you are within a 130-degree angle of the boss's front quarter. Don't stand in the front if you can help it. That way you won't get shot. And not getting shot is usually a good thing. Rippling shockwaves makes a return is in essence as it was previously. It is a knockback the boss does when the boss will stomp his feet, causing you to get sent back. Now, you can avoid this entirely by jumping over the shockwaves, or by running out of the radius of said waves. The plasma grenade is also back, and is exactly what it sounds like. These are a cluster of grenades that have actually had a slight change in the way they project themselves, and these will launch from the boss's spine and land around the boss, but mostly in front of the boss. Standing within 4 meters of these will deal 400 blast damage, and at the lower levels, that's a lot of damage. Sorry. That's a lot of damage! So don't stand in these. I mean, realistically, most boss mechanics can come down to the fundamental fact of don't stand in the stupid. Because if you stand in the stupid, you're stupid. So don't stand in the stupid. Now for some new stuff. Grid Wall is an ability the Jackal will cast when one of the health bars of his legs have been completely depleted, at which point the boss will then be sent into the air and levitate in place like a decorative Christmas tree ornament. He will then project out 4 walls from his belly, starting these walls in an inert blue state, allowing you to move through them and position yourself before they turn red and activate. Once activate, if you are hit by one of these walls, you will be dealt a lot of damage. Now, you can avoid this quite easily by just moving in the direction of the beams, or should you wish to test your athleticism, you can bullet jump over them entirely if you bullet jump straight upwards. In any case, these walls are definitely the hardest hitting ability you will encounter during this fight, so avoiding getting hit by these is quite important. However, it gets harder and harder based on where he ends up doing them. If he ends up doing them in a corner, you got less room to move in. If he ends up doing them next to one of the other things that happens in this encounter, then, well, you're going to just probably have to face tank something here, and you can technically walk through them without dying should your health be topped off. Every time the Jackal finishes a cast of Grid Wall, he will then jump down again and cause a massive shockwave, which in essence acts very similarly to his other shockwave ability, but instead is hyperflated, causing you to get knocked back twice as far and be dealt a bit more damage. But when he does land, he will then be exposed and allow you to perform a Parazon finisher. Obviously, at that point, you need to rush in and get at least one of you to perform the Parazon finisher to move on to the next part of the fight. The final ability, well, not really an ability, so to say, but something that's very worth keeping an eye on and avoiding are the electric fields the Jackal will generate. In Phase 2, which we'll talk about in a bit, the Jackal will cause the electric nodes around the wall to generate electric fields, slowly cordoning off the room and giving you less and less room to work with. Now, you can go through these fields, but you will be dealt a lot of electricity damage, and the longer the fight goes on, the less and less room you'll have to fight and work with, and it will become increasingly hard to avoid the other abilities the Jackal does as this comes up. Now that we got the subtext of the abilities out of the way, now we can talk about the fight itself. And in essence, it kind of still goes around the same notion. There's just a bit more of a visceral feel to it. At the start, you'll enter and begin the fight, killing poor little popcorn in the process. And in the first room, you have the bare bones of the boss. Its simple abilities with the cannon and shockwave are the main things you'll be dealing with here. But once you shoot out a leg and cause the Jackal to be crippled, the Jackal will then go into the Grid Wall mode. Should you perform a successful Parazon after he's dropped back down, the boss will consider you an actual challenge and run away like a little sissy girl to the back room. You'll follow him through, and that's where Phase 2 begins. What's that? A boss encounter in Warframe having phases? Since when did Warframe turn into World of Warcraft? In this final room is when you're going to face the Jackal at its full. You'll have to destroy the 3 remaining legs, and every time you do so, you'll need to perform the Parazon finisher again. But every time you destroy one of the legs, you will start making the Jackal stronger. After you destroy the second one, he'll start attacking faster. After you destroy the third one, he'll start attacking even faster and harder. And by the time you get to the fourth, he will have spawned so many electric walls around the room that, well, suffice to say there's a lot of stuff you'll have to avoid. But the process here is very simple. The longer the fight goes, the more you're going to have to take damage and the less room you're going to have to work with. The process doesn't really change. You shoot out a leg, you wait for him to do his grid wall, and you can utilize the environment to your advantage here as well. Using the pillars that are destroyed or using the pillars around the outside edge of the room, you can avoid a lot of the abilities this guy will cast. But as this is the beginner fight in the game, you don't have to take this too seriously. Honestly, as a beginner fight goes, this is a great introduction for new players to Warframe boss mechanics, especially the ones that are newer. And this is something we're going to be talking about in a moment when we discuss the idea of boss design philosophy and how it's changed over the years. Now, as far as the boss design goes, I love this. I honestly think that Warframe is going through a massive change into a state that it definitely has needed to for many years. We look at the Jackal and how they've changed it from the original incarnation to this, and we see that DE's design philosophy around bosses has most certainly changed. We are no longer in a state where the emphasis is difficulty. We're no longer in a state where we are just fighting a boss with invulnerability frames. It is very evident, especially with a lot of the changes with the Deadlock Protocol, the fact their big focus on the visceral, visual, and thematics of the game are the priority. And we can see this with the Jackal encounter. We can see this with the Deadlock Protocol. Warframe now, more so than ever before, is becoming about the immersion. It's about making you feel like you're part of the encounter. Whereas before, the Jackal was definitely a bit of an imposing character, the cinematic, the environment that you're now fighting him in is part of the encounter. You feel immersed within the world, and let alone the mechanics the boss now comes with, you actually feel like it's a fight. You don't just feel like you're sat there blotting away at a dude with invulnerability frames. And I think that's something important to realize, is Warframe is no longer about the difficulty. Yes, there is still some push towards making the game difficult, especially at the later stages, but let's face it, the Jackal is the first boss we are ever going to encounter, and this boss is designed to hook and grab new players in. It's designed to show a new player, wow, that's pretty cool, I can't wait to have this kind of an experience with later bosses. Now, although we are still waiting for things like Lieutenant Let Krill and Captain Vor to get reworks, when they do, we're very likely to see this kind of design philosophy be impacting on these later boss redesigns. And I think we can all agree, for those who have seen them, things like the Sergeant definitely need it. Because, let's face it, the game has changed, and we need to have the game be representative of the late game. The new player experience for the longest time has been Warframe's weakest element. And now that we're seeing a big focus on making the visual, thematic, and also the immersive nature of the game more interesting in the early stage, when we see things like the tutorial levels get their rework, when we see these other bosses get their rework, it's going to be far more reflective of how later missions run with things like the rope list encounter and things like that. They'll allow a player to feel like they're getting much more involved with the world. Because if you have no emotional connection with what's going on in a fight, if you have no interest in how the world is around you, you can't really get connected with the game. And I do feel like these changes we're seeing with the Deadlock Protocol, the new tile sets, this is all designed to make a new player get in for the first time and go, wow, this is really cool. I want to see what the rest of the game is like. But is it all a bit much? I mean, this Jackal fight has turned from something very bland into something that's very in your face. And some people might say it's even too difficult for a new player experience. But I would say that this is just a balance. I think once we have seen more come out of DE, once we've seen later and earlier stages have this same philosophy put into them, this will become the norm. And I honestly think that this Jackal design is probably the best boss design we've seen so far. We're seeing a lot of new methods being introduced. We're seeing a lot of new ideologies being put forwards that we've never seen before. And I think this is the beginning of something great. And I would love to get to know what you think. If you have comments about where you think this design philosophy is going, if you have comments about how you enjoy this new experience or whether you dislike it, please do comment down below. I want these kind of videos to not only be somewhere where we talk about the changes, but also where we talk about our opinions on it. Because if we can give constructive feedback, if we can get a forum of debate going about how we think things are shaping up, we can have an influence on how the game ends up being. Warframe is very unique in that sense, where the community are very much inclined to the changes based on in the game. So, with that being said, I hope you've liked this video. Hopefully this guide/discussion has been helpful and informative to you. And I hope you look forward to the future videos we're going to be making with the Protea guide. We're going to be remaking the Spy guide, the All Bosses guide. I've kind of been waiting for those two because Deadlock Protocol changed a lot. And I wanted to wait for that before I remade those two so I could actually make it finalized. The Spy Guide remake should be a bit later. We're going to split that into 2 separate videos. And the Bosses remake is going to be a lot more clear-cut and quick. So, hopefully looking forward to those. Hopefully look forward to the next video. And I'll see you all in the next video. Ta-ra!